What is up, everybody, and welcome to FLW Videos. In today's episode, we will be talking about a raid guide for Entei in Pokemon Go. If you haven't heard yet, we are going to end up getting a legendary raid day, a 3-hour event for Entei on July 14th, and many of you may be curious as to what we need to use as a counter versus Entei. Well, in the past, I previously just not covered this type of content because I felt like it wasn't quite enough to make a video out of it, and then secondarily, it just seemed to be a little bit on the boring side. However, we ended up seeing an update by Pokemon Go Hub where they ended up talking about a heat map instead, and the reason why I like it so much is it takes a look at the Pokemon on a per level basis. Because believe it or not, not everyone has fully maxed out Pokemon, and secondarily, at lower levels, you can actually see a shift in the ranking among the Pokemon dependent on the level. That's just how some of their stats end up working out. And because of that, I felt like I should cover this. If it ends up doing good, I will continue to do it moving forward in the future. So if you do enjoy that, make sure to hit that like button, and if you are new, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. I'm excited about getting into this graphic. If you do want to take a look at the entire list, it goes down to like 40 something different movesets. Definitely check out the link in the description. So when we pulled this up, I thought that the first thing we would do, of course, is take a look at the level 20 Pokemon. And I've also created a little bit of a cursor to showcase the top 3 Pokemon. Number 1 will be green, number 2 will be yellow, and then number 3 will be red. So taking a look at level 20 Pokemon, we're going to end up seeing that Kyogre actually takes over the number 1 spot from a level 20 perspective. Then you're going to actually have Feraligatr in at number 2, which is fairly surprising, at least at first. But throughout this entire video, you will notice that Feraligatr is something that may be kind of the sleeper Pokemon as far as counters are concerned. And then finally, we've got Rampardos in at the number 3 spot. But as you can see on the time to win, we've got a pretty big difference between the two. So now that we have talked about level 20, let's go ahead and move on to level 25. So for level 25, we are going to see a little bit of a shift on the number 1 and 2 spot. We've got Rampardos in at number 1, then we have Kyogre in at number 2, and then finally Feraligatr in at number 3. Something kind of interesting that you may have picked up on is we've just simply skipped this Tyranitar the entire time so far. It will finally get its chance to shine once we end up getting into the level 30. It will finally shift itself a little bit. What we're going to end up seeing is a little bit more of a linear progression where we've got Rampardos in at the number 1, Kyogre number 2, and then Tyranitar number 3. So that's the first case that we've seen where it's been like a straight down shift. And Tyranitar, a little bit of a catch to it is that you will have to have the legacy move Smackdown to be able to compete. If you do not have a Smackdown Tyranitar, pretty much kiss it goodbye. And then in that regard, I would say that Feraligatr would be good. Yet again, Hydro Cannon is going to be something that you will have to have for a Community Day exclusive move. So we are seeing a couple of those Community Day exclusive moves hovering around that number 3 and number 4 spot. Of course, if you do not have those, maybe consider shifting down to Gyarados. Let's go to move on to level 35. When we go to level 35, we are back to what we were seeing initially, where we have Rampardos in at the number 1 spot, we've got Kyogre in at the number 2 spot, and then we have Feraligatr in at the number 3 spot. This is becoming fairly interesting because Rampardos, being a non-legendary Pokemon, is really shaping out to be one of the better options versus Entei as a counter. It's versus all of the movesets, by the way, so there could be a couple of cases where it does make sense to choose Kyogre. This is just taking all of the movesets into consideration. So definitely keep that in mind. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next one. Finally finishing out at level 40. Once again, not seeing that much of a difference. We've got Rampardos in at the number 1 spot, Kyogre in at number 2, and then finally Feraligatr in at number 3. And when we take a look at this, once again, we've got some non-legendary Pokemon in the top 3, some legendary, of course, like Kyogre in at the number 2 spot pretty consistently. Something else that's worth mentioning is that Gyarados is not necessarily that far behind once you start getting into some higher levels. You can sort of see the difference between the two. Really not that big of a deal. So just keep that in mind, that we could end up seeing Gyarados, for example, becoming a solid option. But this is really cool to go ahead and talk about this, because I think that a couple Pokemon will just kind of show up that you may not have expected to in the first place, as far as being like a top counter is concerned. For example, I'm going to go ahead and give it to Feraligatr for kind of coming out of left field a little bit, because it ended up getting that Hydro Cannon exclusive move. We have to remember that it is no longer the old Feraligatr. We've of course got the new Feraligatr, and with that, it ends up being a very solid option with the new moveset added in from Community Day. So I'm personally going to consider using that. I think I have a couple weather boosted ones at level 30, level 35, and in that case it's going to be solid. But as long as you are hanging out in the top 4, I think you're going to have a really good time with this versus Entei. The only kind of catch to it is maybe Kyogre being a legendary, but then again, the other ones can be a little bit on the rare side as well, so it's a little bit of a toss-up. But anyways, I hope you did enjoy this video. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more of this in the future, especially regarding raid results and then of course raid counters, let me know in the comments section below, and I will see you next time. This is where we give a huge shout out to the patrons on Patreon. As many of you may not know, as far as YouTube content creators are concerned with smaller channels, you don't make that much money, although there is a lot of hard work that goes into it. So support on Patreon is very important to smaller creators, and I want to say thank you so much for everyone who has chosen to be a part of it.